If you clicked on this video to get some sort of magic pill to publish as fast as possible, some hidden secrets that no other authors have figured out just yet, then no, this is not that. And anyone trying to sell you something like that is probably just trying to line their pockets. So no. What this video is actually about is some fantastic advice from an author I met who has found a way to bring life and emotion to some of the shortest fiction, some of the shortest full-on narrative I have ever read. And it's a form of writing that I actually wasn't that aware of until I actually met this person. It's called flash fiction. Flash fiction, as described by Masterclass, is a genre that is celebrated for its ability to convey deep truths and universal human emotions in just a few short paragraphs. Three characteristics of flash fiction are brevity. While there's no commonly accepted maximum for flash fiction, there's also no commonly accepted minimum. So flash fiction could literally be just a couple words, or it could be a few paragraphs, or even up to 1,000 words. It also has to have a complete plot. It stands out for this reason against other forms of short fiction like poems and vignettes because it actually has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and it has to do this in a very short way. It's actually something that I personally fumbled when I tried. We'll get to that later. It's at the end of this video. And lastly, another characteristic of flash fiction is going to be surprise.
Surprise, motherfucker.
Great flash fiction often incorporates some sort of surprise. It is used as a way to engage the reader to think deeply about the true meaning of the story. Now, I actually don't know shit about flash fiction, which is why I am not the focus of this video. It's David from Moonblimp Publishing who is actually the focus of this video, the author that I mentioned at the beginning of this video. I met David at Comic-Con recently, something I'd recommend for all of you to seek out. Go to conventions in your hometown or nearby and prowl the exhibition halls until you find some authors to talk to. They're almost always eager to chat, unless of course they have a line of people trying to buy their books, and they're often willing to share their timed-honed advice on writing. It's something that I think a lot of us can benefit to. It's a lot of things that I personally have benefited from just by going and meeting people this year at different conventions. David was one of those people that shared some of that advice with me, and we got to chatting, and I actually purchased his book. And speaking of, if you have the means to, please consider buying their work, supporting other authors, especially if they interest you, if what they are writing and working on gets your interest and makes you want to learn. But there's one little hidden tip here. When you are talking to them about their books, listen to their sales pitch. Listen to how they pitch the book that they're trying to sell you, and if it worked on you, and what parts of it did and did not work, because that is something in marketing as an author that you can really learn from. It's something you kind of just get through osmosis, like realizing, oh, you know what, this made me intrigued, because remember that every author is also probably going to be a damn reader. That intrigue is exactly what happened with this book from David, this collection of flash fiction stories on death, murder, and betrayal. This book, fittingly dedicated to Edgar Allan Poe, is a fascinating look at flash fiction. In this short, gorgeously drawn book, there are 21 total stories. 21 stories in this book, and just take a look at, like, I'm gonna put the cover up on the screen because you got to see this. Like, this is actually like a gorgeous book. It's terrifying. I'm not gonna say it's not terrifying. It is an absolutely terrifying cover, but hey, you know, it's really cool. Each story only takes a few minutes to read, but the imagery stays in your mind. In some cases, the art acts as part spoiler, part trailer, adding a unique twist on flash fiction that makes you dread the outcome. If flash fiction seeks to touch emotion, David is successful here. Now let's hear directly from him about 3 great tips he has for writers everywhere, flash fiction and otherwise.
Hey everyone, I'm David Patton, founder and creative director at Moonblimp Publishing. There are a lot of tips for writers out there, but I want to share the 3 tips that have been most valuable in my career. The first is actively work on creative confidence. Creative confidence is recognizing that you have important ideas and that you have the ability to act on them. It's the wellspring that feeds everything downstream in the creative process. However, once acquired, it will be up to you to keep refreshing it. You have to be your own cheerleader and frequently remind yourself that the world needs to hear your story. Number 2, stay an optimist. You must continue to believe that progress is possible even in the face of failure, setbacks, and rejections. There will be many, and creative journeys of all kinds are inherently littered with landmines. And what is failure anyway, if not a learning experience? You must always think of failures as growth. Done is better than good. This may be my most important piece of advice. Many creatives, myself included, have found themselves constantly grooming a piece of work, revising and editing over and over, but never satisfied, and more importantly, never finishing. Years ago when this happened, a business partner said to me, "Hey man, done is better than good because I can sell good." The takeaway is, don't get into your own head. Trust your editor or your test readers and set the work free. It may not be perfect, but you won't learn or grow if you never release the work.
David's tips here are so important for every author to listen to, and I would recommend going back and re-listening to his tips. They're especially important if you deal with imposter syndrome, like honestly all of us do, myself included. I deal with it on a daily basis pretty much. It is very, very easy to fall into a pit of despair when it comes to writing. That sounds dark. Maybe I've read too many of David's flash fiction stories. But it's true. It's easy to kind of feel like you're just kind of like flailing and just feeling like you may never actually make it. Your writing may never be good enough to meet what your own expectations are. And I think that's why it's really important to do kind of what David is saying here, to work on that creative confidence. I kind of feel like it's a bit like a muscle. Exercise that creative confidence and maintain optimism. Maintain optimism in your future prospects and in the future of writing in general. Maintain optimism in yourself. It's not easy. I'm not pretending here it's easy, and I don't think David is either. But it is something that is very essential to going further in writing. We are often our own worst enemies. And that ties into the last point, the done is better than great point. In order to create, you have to actually create and you have to release. And I've talked about this on this channel before, that at one point you just have to realize that your writing actually isn't ever done, it's just released. When I think about my first book, there are still things that I would go back and change right now, years after I first released it. I released that book in 2018, and I'll admit something here that I'm going to talk about in another video later. I changed the opening line to that book this year. I changed it this year, but that's a whole other thing. I'm kind of disproving my own point here. But the whole idea is that you cannot continuously seek perfection, because perfection is impossible to achieve. Because what will happen, especially as a writer, is you will keep moving the bar. You will keep taking the bar that you set of perfection okay, it'll be good enough when it reaches here, but when you reach there, you're probably gonna move that bar a little bit further, and a little bit further, a little bit further. You're gonna keep going until you never actually finish. And I think David's point here is very, very succinct, and it gets it much better than this rambling point, but just, it's better done than good. But just, it's better good than great. So just go back and listen to David's points again, because he did it better than I did. I want to thank David for sharing his time with me and with all of you, and giving some of his writing advice after several years in the sphere. I've linked his website down below, as well as his Kickstarter for 21 Steezy Snuffs, which honestly, I really enjoyed this book. I'm not just saying that. It's kind of creepy, I'm not gonna lie. I kind of went into that. I mean, look at the cover. Like, it's gonna be creepy. That child that's Krampus. Now, so I don't really want to thank him for the nightmares that I will have after reading all 21 of these stories. I think that's something that I'm gonna have to take up with David at some point. Yeah, I'm not happy about that, but I guess someone has to fill in for the shadow of Edgar Allan Poe, right? Are nightmares a compliment to someone who writes stuff like this? I mean, I know that I take it a compliment when people cry over my writing, so I guess so. Now, before I leave you, I mentioned that when I tried to write flash fiction, I kind of failed. And part of that was because it has to be a complete story, a beginning, middle, and end. And I like to, on this channel, every now and then try to do some sort of writing challenges. And one challenge I did was I tried to set forth a time limit for me to write something, and using a prompt from Jazz's Arty Games, just basically a crazy prompt, and tried to force myself to write a story within a very short word limit. And I don't think I did very well. I think it's one of those challenges that I want to revisit, because tying up a story, starting with the beginning, middle, and end in a short time frame, is something that for me personally is very difficult. But one thing I learned while doing that is that I actually feel like it helped me with my longer form writing, because it helped me better understand story structure in a way that long form writing hadn't, because I can always just say, oh, I can just figure that out later. I can keep going and keep going. In short fiction, in flash fiction especially, you don't have that luxury. You've got to get to the fucking point. And I think that's why it's a very helpful thing to do. And if you want to see how I failed at that, you can see it in this video right here. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you to David from Moonblimp Publishing for being part of this video and sharing your tips with us. Now, if you'll excuse me, I am going to go have some existential dread about loss, death, murder, and betrayal. Thanks, David.